Hello and welcome to this talk on gathering data on air-sea interaction with cheap heterogeneous swarms. Looking at three aspects of this issue. First off, air-sea interaction, the science challenges affecting climate prediction and also the offshore wind optimization. Then we'll look at conceptual solutions or getting rid of the ship, and then see how it could be done with Mavlink and leading on to heterogeneous swarms. First problem is the atmosphere is turbulent. Turbulence in the atmosphere, it enhances viscosity. It makes it more like treacle than we might expect, than if it was just dominated by molecular forces. So the turbulence actually increases this viscosity by about 100,000. And this means that the surface drag, these effects are felt all the way up to about 1 kilometre aloft. The solution is measurement, measurement, measurement. Over land, we can make lots of measurements. This is both to improve the models that we have, and there's a lot of research going on. We also do a lot of what's called operational forecasting, and that's getting measurements to nudge the forecast model back online as it drifts away from reality. Over the ocean, the turbulence problem is worse. There are then two fluids to understand, and they're coupled. So the second problem is masts sink in the ocean. Solution: get a big ship. The new Sir David Attenborough, designed to be a floating turbulence lab, amongst other things. So the third problem is the ship significantly affects these very measurements. They're not just expensive, these ships. They're just what you do not want near your measurements when you're trying to measure these profiles, the gradients in the air, and the associated turbulence that goes with it. They block the flows that you're trying to study, and also just being there, it generates more turbulence than is naturally expected. So a radical solution: get rid of the ship. So this is where we introduce the idea of a fleet of robotic aircraft to take measurements of winds and humidity, and a fleet of autonomous surface vehicles to take measurements of the near surface meteorology and also the flow just underneath. In the air, we have the boundary layer winds being measured by a stack of these aircraft, and at the surface we have surface meteorology, ADCPs measuring flow rate, and then WBT measuring turbulence. By flying in a stack, we can make a virtual mast in the ocean. Down on the surface itself, we'd be able to use our small autonomous surface vehicles. These are small ones designed for VOEs and inshore waters, but the idea is much the same. So near surface meteorology here is being measured by a standard RM Young acoustic weather station, and it's deployed on the impeller-driven kayaks that are developed at SAMS, which have been mentioned in previous talks at MASTS. The kayaks are completely autonomous and able to either run missions or stay geostationary by using the avionics to maintain position. Under the surface, we're looking at the flow using Doppler acoustics, the ADCP. Here is a workhorse that's been embedded in the kayak. For near surface measurements above and below the waterline, these remotely piloted aircraft and autonomous surface vehicles are now ideal to address these issues for a number of reasons. Firstly, they're relatively cheap compared to autonomous underwater vehicles, and they're far simpler to operate because we've got radio access continually and we have GPS continually to these vehicles. But for this talk, I'm more interested in how they can actually communicate with each other, and that is how we make a swarm as opposed to just a fleet of instruments. At this point in the discussion, the platforms are not acting as a swarm, they are independently piloted. We fly the aircraft using a mission controller with a chief pilot able to take action if there are problems. We do exactly the same with the kayaks. The benefit comes in from using the same family of avionics in the aircraft and ASVs. And on these platforms we run a branch of the Ardu Pilot software running on the Pixhawk avionics. So a typical flight of a Morated piloted aircraft system, the aircraft follows its pre-programmed mission, the scientist monitors the data, and the emergency pilot constantly plans for a safe intervention if things start to go awry. If you want to have a fleet of aircraft and autonomous surface vehicles, it becomes a bit more complex because you get 2 pilots and 2 scientists all running at the same time. Each time you add another instrumented platform, you add 2 more people. By having the same avionics on the aircraft and the ASV, the aircraft can be aware of where the ASV is. It is then possible to have a follow mode, which has already been written into the software, so wherever the boat goes, the aircraft copies that operation. So in summary, to take undisturbed measurements of air-ocean interface, coordinated swarms of small robotic sensors can augment a shipborne coastal array. Air-sea interaction is a climate research priority, but other science theatres are accessible to this same technology. Thank you for listening.
Hello, David McKee, University of Strathclyde. This is just a quick presentation to discuss various aspects of optical sensing and sensing light in the ocean, and how I believe that MASTS can foster a unique community of expertise. It is well known that light is a key driver of primary production in the ocean. It's also well known that light influences animal behaviours in a number of ways. For example, through diurnal vertical migration of zooplankton, as we see on the right hand side here. Being able to measure and to model natural underwater light fields is therefore clearly important. These natural light fields are under threat from human activities in a number of ways. Artificial light at night, light pollution, is the most obvious and is particularly severe near heavily populated coastal areas. However, impacts of global warming through things like reduced ice cover and changes to sediment inputs are also important features. As an example, here I'm showing results from work we recently published documenting animal responses to artificial light from a research ship during polar night. The acoustic sounder data on the right shows animals being startled down to at least 200 metres by ship's lights being switched on. Now ideally we would want to measure the associated light levels directly, but they're far below our current measurement thresholds, so for this paper we had to rely on optical modelling instead. There is a growing demand to measure low light levels in the ocean for a variety of applications, and there's a difficult trade-off between maximising sensor sensitivity and both maximising spectral resolution and ensuring radiometric accuracy. Working with colleagues at SAMS up in Oban and my Norwegian colleagues in Tromsø and Trondheim, we're developing new approaches to maximise data exploitation from a new generation of highly sensitive detectors that have relatively poorly constrained optical configurations, and we're doing this by using careful cross-calibration with lower sensitivity but radiometrically gold standard sensors. The aim of this work is to deliver high quality light field data that can be assimilated into models or used to validate them, and establishing known data quality is the key issue. We also want to use light to measure biogeochemical properties of the ocean. Optical sensors operate across size scales from the microscopic up to basin scales from satellites. This success is partly based on the technology being particularly well suited to operation in harsh environments. We're looking at no moving parts, no wet chemistry, low power, etc. Existing sensors reveal information about multiple aspects of marine life, and we can anticipate significant further growth of capabilities in the coming years. Through all of this, we can identify some common emerging themes. Again, data quality is the single most important feature. More specifically, known data quality is essential. Here I'm showing some new results from a machine learning algorithm to derive chlorophyll from ocean colour data, and showing that it massively improves the quality of data compared to the industry standard algorithm. There's a strong move to democratise access to technology. For example, things like being able to 3D print components and developing sensors that address operator needs and capabilities. And very importantly, the development of new remote and autonomous platforms is driving development of sensors to exploit these new opportunities. In all of these different aspects of using light to sense the ocean or to understand how biology responds to light, it is clear that there is an absolute need to build teams with genuine interdisciplinarity. MASTS can provide a mechanism to foster that collaboration between biologists, physicists and engineers, basically allowing us to become bigger than the sum of the parts. I think sensing light and sensing with light in the ocean is a potentially broad theme that we could use to build a node of expertise. Collectively, we have real leading expertise to work on design and construction of new sensors and to improve interpretation and modelling of data. So, take home message for me is let's try to find ways to make the most of that opportunity. Thanks.
Monitoring coastal erosion from space. What is feasible and how confident are we on the changes detected? So, who are we? We are a consortium of a project funded by the European Space Agency, which we have been working over the last 2 years to tackle these two questions. My name is Andres. I was responsible of the UK component of this particular project, and I will be presenting a synthesis of what we found in the next 5 minutes or so. It is important to emphasize that this was a user-focused project. In phase 1 of the project, it was a two-phase project. In the phase 1, we, the end user from the UK, Republic of Ireland, Spain and Quebec, we define which one were our users' requirements, what do we wanted, data gaps that we thought can be filled in using satellite observation technology. Then the service providers, which is led by Argans, and including ISARSAT and Advice EO, they told us out of all those requirements which one were feasible to produce. And then in phase 2 of the project, they actually produced those products that were feasible, and then we, the end users, have to validate those data to see if the requirements that we requested were achieved and if the products were useful as we thought it will be. And they have to do this for the 25-year archive time series, and as I said, for at least 1,000 kilometers of coastline for the 4 different countries. If it is the first time that you are working with your service provider, the very first question that you need to ask them is how have you co-registered the images that you are using to produce any of the products that you see on the slide. Why? Because if you are using the default co-registration provided by Sentinel or Landsat, this is good, but it's not the best one. So you can actually improve that significantly by doing an extra step during the co-registration. So that is probably the very first question you need to ask. Then you see that you have a range of different products on the slide. I guess that depending on which one is your interest, you will be interested on one or the other. For example, if you are interested on changes that do affect the interface between the land and the water, then you are looking likely to waterlines or shorelines as a product. If you are more interested on changes that are not affecting the land-water interface, but it might be affecting something in the backshore, then you might be looking at the land cover for backshore classification map. For example, if you have an interest on landslide along the coast, that they might be big landslides, but they don't reach the shoreline, so they don't affect the waterline. So then you are more interested on the backshore classifications. On the other side, if you are looking at trying to map the sediment balance on a particular area, then you might be looking at the bathymetric model, trying to understand if the changes that you are seeing are sort of balanced off or they're not balanced off. So if you are working with water lines are the interface between the land and the water. It can be produced either using optical or using SAR data. And again, knowing which type of data should you use is not straightforward. Why? Because yes, optical data are more easy to interpret because it's like an image, so the user can interpret what you see on the image, and it comes with multispectral information, which can be handy and useful, for example, to track vegetation changes. But it is affected by the cloud coverage. If you have a lot of cloud on your area, the number of images you can use is quite limited then. On the other side, if you use satellite images from SAR, from radar data, they are transparent to the clouds, which is very good. So you have a higher, more frequency of water lines that you can produce. But the interpretation is not that straightforward. For example, we've learned that depending on the orientation of the satellite angle relative to the coastline orientation, the quality of the water lines might be better or worse. So a more useful product is the shoreline, which is actually the water line converted to a given datum, the mean high level, the mean sea level, or the low water mark, whatever the users defined. But of course, you need some extra auxiliary data that is not always available. You need the water level at the time of the image was taken, either measure or model, and you need some indication of the scale of the slope of the nearshore bathymetry and topography. Of course, when you're looking at other products, for example, the 3D bathytopo morpho-terrain model in places where the water quality is not that clear, then you might also want to have, in addition to the bathymetry, some metadata indicating which pixel are you confident that you are actually picking the depth, or which pixel you are picking something else like a cloud of suspended material. In only 5 minutes I can cover a small amount of the ground that I would like to cover, but please do feel free to visit the websites, either the BGS if you want to know more about the Coast and Estuaries program, or the dedicated website of the project if you want to know more detail of the coastal erosion from the space project.